Welcome to the Online Great Books podcast, brought to you by OnlineGreatBooks.com, where we talk about the good life, the great books, great conversation, and great ideas. Welcome to the show. I'm Scott Hambrick. There is Karl Shute over there, and today we're going to talk about some chunks of Thomas Hobbes's book, The Leviathan. Karl and I were going to look at chapters 13, 14, 15, and 17. Which one did you read, Karl?
Which one of those chapters?
No, which book? Which edition?
Oh, I used my Great Books edition.
Oh.
Machiavellian Hobbes packaged together in volume 23 of Encyclopedia Britannica's Great Books collection.
That means something. They put those two together, doesn't it? I'm reading the Hackett one. It still has the sort of King James thou and doeth and wheresoevers and so on, but the spelling has been normalized for modern spelling.
Yeah, it's early-ish English. Dear listener, if you're interested, the Kindle edition that you can get for free has the original spelling and capitalization, which is fun.
Let's talk about spelling in the English language.
Okay, let's.
We have this tyranny about spelling. This has come to me in the last week. I think that's one of the reasons that our phonics and our spelling and the language is so damn difficult, because we just froze the spellings in time and for some of these words at 1351, 1605, whatever. And now that's how you spell it from hereafter, whether you pronounce it differently or not.
I agree with that. I kind of like it, though. It's obscure and Byzantine. And
and you're nothing if not Byzantine.
Right. The language, the English language is a labyrinth, and I kind of like it that way. But there are spelling rules, and they do make sense. The problem is there's 5 of them. There's 5 sets of rules, and they're different.
Yeah, because if there were 5 rules, we were just going to scrub this Hobbes podcast and just cover these 5 rules. But no, there are 5 sets.
Compare the word tough, T-O-U-G-H, and the word through,
right?
T-H-R-O-U-G-H. So you think you've got a handle on the O-U-G-H thing.
Or how about bow, B-O-U-G-H, and tough? What?
Yeah. I had a teacher, my Aristotle professor, actually, back at Marquette. She would put G-H-O-C on the board and ask everybody what it spelled. People are saying, gawk? No, it spells fish. According to the rules of English spelling. So G-H at the end of tough makes F. And the O in the plural of woman makes the I sound, women. And C, as in vicious, makes sh. So using English spelling rules, you can spell fish, G-H-O-C.
That's horrible. Yeah, we've got Latinate spelling rules. We have Saxon spelling rules. We have Indo-European spelling rules. And then I don't know what the other 5 sets would be.
And then we have Greek and all sorts of other things in there, like chrysanthemum. It's... So if you want the old-timey spelling, you go find the Kindle edition or some sort of facsimile of Thomas Hobbes, and you get to do that. I also like the title. I like Leviathan. I think it's a fantastic title.
Yep.
It's this mythological critter from the King James Bible. I think Job talks about God playing with Leviathan in the deep.
Yeah. The full title of the book, though, is, gosh, now I have to look. I don't even remember what it is. I have to look it up. It's big. It's long. It's meaningful. Leviathan, or the matter, form, and power of a commonwealth, ecclesiastical and civil.
And I love it especially because Leviathan's a sea monster. And right away, so Hobbes is setting up the state as something that you can't rebel against, that you shouldn't, that it's irrational to rebel against. But Leviathan's also kind of scary. Great title.
The book plate from the original edition is out there. If you do a Google search for Hobbes Leviathan, that's going to be the first image that comes up probably. And it's a monster, a great big person. And if you look at it quickly, you say, oh, he's wearing chainmail or something. But if you look very closely, his body is made up of little people.
It's Freddy Krueger's chest. In the one movie, Freddy Krueger pulls up his shirt and he's got all the faces of the kids he's eaten, like poking out of his belly. That's Leviathan.
Wow. All right, there's a show, guys. So let's talk about, how did this read for you?
He says things about human nature that I don't want to be true, but that I'm not sure aren't true.
What do they say? What do they say? Show me the lie.
Yeah. So his most famous quote is the bit about war and our quality of life and the state of nature. I'm pulling up my quote. We're always in danger of violent death, and the life of man solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. The joke is that's the law firm that you want to represent you. But that in the state of nature, we all have the same right to everything.
Okay. Well, keep going.
Well, and he posits there's a reasonable equality of strength amongst human beings, amongst men at least. He doesn't really talk about women.
Well, I don't think he has to. Okay, this is chapter 13.
Well, he might have to if he's going to use strength as his determiner for people having a right of everything, because with strength, it's going to be the men who have the right to everything.
Well, he says in chapter 13, which is called Of the Natural Condition of Mankind as Concerning Their Felicity and Misery. He says that when all is reckoned together, the difference between man and man is not so considerable as that one man can thereupon claim to himself any benefit to which another may not pretend. And then he says, for as to the strength of body, the weakest has strength enough to kill the strongest, either by secret machination or by confederacy. Those ladies can sneak up on you and kill you with a hat pin.
Yeah, okay, so maybe they also have the right to everything that they can hold on to with their hands, which is what you have in the state of nature. You can have as much as you want as long as you carry it with you. But when you put it down, I can grab it.
Right.
And I probably am going to grab it because it's nice stuff and I want it.
He's very scholastic in his writing method.
Yes.
If then, very geometrical. He says, 1, men are mostly equal in intellect and strength. And if they're not equal in strength, like he says, the machinations and the duplicitousness and confederacy can make them more equal. 2, he says, when they want something, when 2 men want the same thing, they are enemies.
Yes.
Don't know about that. Here's exactly what he says. If any 2 men desire the same thing, which nevertheless they cannot both enjoy, they become enemies. So these are his presuppositions. 3, he says, dominion over man ought to be allowed in order to keep security. And then 4, men are in grief when there is no overweening power above them all. Dang it.
The way the text is going is that we need to have an overweening power. I just want to stop and say, do we ever use the word weaning?
Not enough.
It's not the same weaning as a kid going away from its mother. I need to look this up on the Oxford English Dictionary.
I will do that as you vamp.
Means. So the tendency of the text is that we need to have a supreme power. I dipped in a little bit into the history. Hobbes lived a long time, and he lived through the British Civil Wars, which I lost track of, but lots of people got their heads cut off, including the king. So this is the context in which he's writing, a time of civil discord, of war of all against all. And this is what he sees in human nature. One of the early things he did a translation of Thucydides, which I have somewhere in my house.
Which I hear is excellent.
It is. I need to dig it out. Where if you read your Peloponnesian War, history of the Peloponnesian War, it's the war of every state against every other state, and it's a bad time. And so how do you get out of the bad times that he's experienced? We probably haven't experienced it very much right now, and so you might think this is very foreign. I don't see why you need to have this overweening power, but if you lived through the British Civil Wars, you might think, yeah, I'd rather have a commonwealth against whom there could be no rebellion, because we'd be peaceful.
I'm still looking up weaning. I'm in the OED, and I'm still not getting in here and figuring out what this means. Okay, so let's talk about this overweening power, Carl. overweening to have excessively or unreasonably high expectations, especially of oneself. Doesn't jive.
No, I don't think that's the sense that he means it. Because if you don't have the sovereign power, then, we have our solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short lives. So let's talk about why life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Let's count those out. So the paragraph where he talks about that, we're all at war with each other in the state of nature, where I can grab whatever I can get with my hands, and you can take it if you're stronger than me. In such condition, there is no place for industry, because the fruit thereof is uncertain, and consequently no culture of the earth, no navigation, nor use of the commodities that may be imported by sea, no commodious building, no instruments of moving or removing such things as require much force, no knowledge of the face of the earth, no account of time. That's interesting. No arts, no letters, no society, and which is worst of all, continual fear and danger of violent death in the life of man, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. That this is the alternative he's setting up. And so if the argument's going to work, you have to believe that this is the alternative, that this is what anarchy looks like.
Yeah. 2 paragraphs later, which in your book, dear listener, as Karl likes to call you, book 13, paragraph 11, he talks about the peoples of the Americas live in just this situation. So this is like...
That's like Florida?
1610, right?
Right. Just kidding.
Florida man. Poor Florida man. So he uses them as an example of what this sort of interfamilial war and snatch and grab brutishness and tooth and claw life would be like.
Mm-hmm.
So he's a little bit of a sociologist. Karl, I was hearkened back from this section to our friend Thucydides.
Yes.
Thucydides? How we say it?
Thucydides?
Yeah. He says, right on the very first page, if you're in your Thucydides History of the Peloponnesian War, he says, it is evident that the country now called Hellas had in ancient times no settled population. On the contrary, migrations were a frequent occurrence, several tribes readily abandoning their homes under pressure of superior number, without commerce, without freedom of communication either by land or sea, cultivating no more of their territory than the necessities of life required, destitute of capital, never planting their lands, thinking that the necessities of sustenance could be supplied at one place as well as another. He just goes on for like 3 pages about how they didn't have a government, and it's just tooth and claw. They didn't have navigation. Because of their political system, they were unable to forward the arts.
If that's a live problem to you, then the rest of his argument makes sense, or makes some sense.
Is it not a live problem to you?
It's a live problem to me because I read a lot of books, but I think lots of people are ready to smash everything, and they don't see that once it's smashed, really, really bad things happen.
Now what?
Yeah, this is a little off topic, but there's a thing on YouTube that graphs all of the casualties in warfare over time. It has huge spikes in World War I and then enormous spikes in World War II. And you can't conceive, they do like every 1,000 people gets a little man figure in the graph. And you see just how many people were killed in these wars. And if you went back to the Civil War, it'd be bad too. And then after that, after Korea, pretty much, it's a trickle. It's a trickle for a bunch of reasons, but we have not experienced nature red in tooth and claw very much, and we think everything's great. I mean, Pinker's book about how the Enlightenment worked. Well, maybe there's something going on in the last 60 years that's made this not happen.
But 60 years doesn't mean anything. Like in the arc of history,
right?
Of the possibilities of human experience, 60 years is nothing.
Right. Rome had peace for 200 years after Augustus.
Yeah. And then what?
It was good time, and then didn't. Yeah.
Well, we'll get to this. This is kind of the stuff towards the end of our readings where we get into the legitimacy of the government and whether you should overthrow or not. All that stuff comes in later. He says, Karl, I underlined this because I knew it made your beard stand out straight. The desires and other passions of man are in themselves no sin, he says. No more are the actions that proceed from these passions till they know a law that forbids them.
Right.
Which, till laws be made, they cannot know, nor can any law be made till they have agreed upon the person that shall make it. And then the next chapter is about natural law.
Yeah, so nature is presumed to be good by nature.
Wait a minute. Do you think Hobbes thinks it's good? I don't think so.
Well, it's no sin.
Okay.
If you're living in the state of nature, it's not wrong for you to kill your neighbor and take his food.
Right.
There isn't a wrong. Or rather, the right is you're hungry and there's his stuff and he's in your way. And that's good enough.
Okay.
But there isn't a law saying murder is wrong, because who would make the law?
Does the law have to be written for it to be true and real?
I think Hobbes would say so.
He does say so.
Yeah. Well, the opposition would be the idea that there's a natural law that you can know. It's Paul says it. St. Paul says it's written in your hearts, that you just know that murder is wrong. Although he doesn't use that example.
Aquinas says though that law must be. He says it must be promulgated.
Yeah.
Like
Well, how is the natural law promulgated?
By Uncle Tom says it's because you partake in divinity and you partake in divine knowledge, and so you have an inkling, but darkly, of what is best.
Yeah,
partaking in that divine knowledge.
Yeah. What would Hobbes say about?
He'd say, "I'm hungry. Give me that shit." That's what he'd say.
Yeah, and he also says specifically about religious motivations that it's too unclear. Like, religion is not a good enough reason to rebel against a government. Let's say you think the king is a heretic or something, that your knowledge of things transcendental is not clear enough to give you reasons to do that.
He's sitting right smack in the middle of Protestant Catholic infighting in England. So is there heterogeneity the source of their infighting? Would they have had that problem if they had all been one thing?
Well, they thought they needed to be one thing. That's when you look back at the wars of religion, it's not so much about the religion. It's an easy thing for people to say, well, religion was the source of all of these fights. No, the source of all these fights was the same thing. It's always the source of fights. Land and property and power, and religion is the excuse. But if you're all of one religion, then what you're doing is making one nation, one people. You're making one Leviathan.
Mm.
And religion would be the tool by which the princes would establish a Leviathan. So you got to have Church of England, or you have to be Catholic, or you have to be, I don't know, whatever the Scottish were, Presbyterian and Catholic.
Right.
But having them all on the same team was the goal, and the religion, I think, was the instrument.
So for those that now think that what we've got ain't no good and we need to tear it down, I think many of them are acting from the three sources of conflict that he names, which are competition, yes, diffidence, or glory. I think most of them, it's about competition, which is they seek gain in one way or another, whether that is power, resources, or extra rights. He says good rights are only those which would be extended to all. And I think that a lot of the people that want to tear it down are taking place in those three causes of quarrel, he calls them. But they also, I think, they lack an understanding of history. He points this out too. He says, it may peradventure be thought. I love that. Overweening, peradventure be thought there was never such a time nor condition of war as this. And I believe it was never generally so all over the world. But there are many places where they live so now for the savage people. This is back to the thing about America. I think, there's this meme out there about hard times make soft men, and soft men make hard times, and hard times make hard men.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got some soft times right now, and people have lost sight, I think, of how very bad and violent and difficult life has been for man for most of our existence.
There's a bit in Thucydides.
Thucydides?
Yeah, at the very end of the Sicilian expedition, these Athenian, they're dying of thirst. And so they're fighting each other for the muddy water in the stream while the Syracusans are slaughtering them. So they're drinking the muddy water of their comrades while they're being killed.
Yep.
Because they're so desperate for water. this is the depth to which a human can sink. And I don't think it takes much. And one of the benefits of reading history is you get to see all this stuff, and you can think that it's very depressing, and it is, but it wouldn't take much. Cut the water off from Manhattan. How many days would it take?
1. All nations should beware their Sicilian expeditions.
Yeah, isn't that like Fazzini says in Princess Bride?
Yeah, is it avoid land wars in Southeast Asia or whatever?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or the Middle East. Neocons are not reading their Thucydides. Or, in fact, they're Hobbes either. Because he says, so men need to, he says that this life is hard, it's tooth and nail. Or we have a right, he says. We have a natural right to do whatsoever we need to preserve ourselves. We have a right to do what we need to do to preserve ourselves. From that right to do whatever you need to do, a great deal of conflict can spring. So he says that we need laws to temper that right, and the laws have to be promulgated and executed by a sovereign. But this is interesting. In paragraph 12 there of that chapter 13, he says, I'll just paraphrase, sovereigns are in a state of nature. Between sovereigns, it's tooth and nail. It's fight, 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 get what you can, preserve thyself. And I think that in the mid-20th century, statesmen recognized this problem. And they said, well, let's have a League of Nations or a UN, and then we'll have a court at The Hague, and we'll do a bunch of stuff here, you know, so that we have overweening power that can govern sovereigns so that we can stop the conflict and the quarrels that arise between sovereigns. But there is an infinite regress problem. Like it's sovereigns all the way up.
Yeah, so you need if you think this is a problem, the competing nation states, then you need to have a bigger one.
Right.
Right? Is Thomas Hobbes in favor of the New World Order?
I don't think he is. He says, bing, bang, you know, it's a problem that sovereigns exist in a state of nature, but he goes no further than that. And this guy is not, or at least I didn't see that he went further. And I did read this whole darn book, not just these selections. And this guy isn't a dude that leaves a stone unturned.
So we don't need to have, this is not a plan for world conquest for the sake of peace?
I don't think so. What do you think?
It's been a long time since I read the whole thing. So he's not Emperor Palpatine. That's a pop culture reference. That's Star Wars. I know you've never seen it.
Palpatine. I don't know. That sounds like...
It sounds like a growth.
Sodomy. Okay.
Yeah. But you know, it's like in Star Wars, the goal of the Empire of Darth Vader is to bring peace to the galaxy. You know, why not?
Yeah.
I suppose at some point today we got to talk about the why not, because it does bug me. I don't want this to be true.
Oh, yeah.
Live free or die, you know? I don't want this to be true. But he makes an interesting case. So what is it that makes people want to live in a commonwealth? At the very end of 13, he says, the passions that incline men to peace are fear of death, desire of such things as are necessary to commodious living, and a hope by their industry to obtain them. So fear, desire, and hope.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's going to lead us, he's going to derive what he calls laws of nature that come out of that should lead you to, I guess, a commodious life.
Ooh, he's so grim. I'm just going to read a few of these little quotes I wrote down. In war between men, nothing can be unjust. He makes an argument for how we know that all people are awful, because even the family man locks his chest when he's away from home and the house is occupied by his family. We go about armed because we know that man at any time can do awful things to us. And he's just so grim. His picture of human nature is not sunny, and maybe not wrong.
Yeah. I think maybe not complete, but I guess we'll get to that. What are the laws of nature? So the first one is that if you want to live a good life, this is, I guess I can count paragraphs 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth paragraph of 14. It is a precept or general rule of reason that every man ought to endeavor peace as far as he has hope of obtaining it, and when he cannot obtain it, that he may seek and use all helps and advantages of war. So we get the first law of nature, to seek peace and follow it. It's good for you to live in peace. I think you should seek to have a civil order. The second law, and this is where I kind of grit my teeth, and I say, uh-oh. He says, that a man be willing when others are so too. As far forth as for peace and defense of himself he shall think it necessary to lay down this right to all things, and be contented with so much liberty against other men as he would allow other men against himself.
My 8th grade Oklahoma history teacher, Mr. Dane Davis, who was my mom and dad's history teacher, by the way, he said that your rights end where another begins. So he's saying we should be willing to lay down those rights insofar as the others are willing to do that as well for the mutual good. So this is the social contract, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I agree not to steal your stuff. You agree not to steal my stuff. And therefore we have 2 households. Now we are a little more of a community. Maybe you make shoes and I grow grain and I trade grain for shoes or whatever. We've got beginnings of a commonwealth where we both live better than we would individually. But it requires us not to grab the stuff that we could grab. I can't do a raiding party to your house and go grab your stuff. But it starts to grate on me because now I have to take my liberty, which I like. I like my liberty, and I have to restrict it. And I have to not do things that I might want to do. I'm worried, how far is this going to go? When's it going to stop?
You said liberty, and I wanted to go back to this. He defines liberty at the very beginning of this chapter. Liberty is understood according to the proper signification of the word, the absence of external impediment. So that's what he calls liberty. Like everybody nowadays, these kids these days, they all throw around this, like, I'm making all these big, broad statements. I'm going to keep doing it. So if you don't like it, kiss my ass. You hear about freedom, and what they really mean is choice. Like almost every time I see someone write something out about freedom, you could play Mad Lib and pluck freedom out and put choice in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that everything being a choice renders a good to the person, to us. Choice isn't necessarily good. There are some choices that are super, super bad, and I would be better off not even considering them. And then there's also paralysis. Just everything being an option is just overwhelming. And also all this choice, because there's so much plenty in the choice, can make us feel a sense of loss when we have to choose one thing. We can't do all of them. So when you choose one, you experience a small loss of the things that you foreclosed on at that point.
Yeah.
And I have problems with this modern idea, this popular idea now of freedom, which is equated with choice. And I'm much more interested in the Hobbesian liberty, which is the ability to act without external impediment. But he says we have to contract for peace, and in doing so, cough up a little liberty.
Yeah, but I don't think it's a little.
Maybe not. But, in his defense, if you have all of your natural liberty, other people's bodies belong to you. He says you can kill them, you can knock them in the head.
Sure.
You can take their turnips.
Yeah, so if you read your history, we're not actually going to read Livy, but Livy's great fun.
We can do that here.
He tells the story of the beginnings of the Roman. It's a mythological. All of their records kept burning down. The Capitol building in Rome kept burning, and that's where they kept their records. So Livy had to kind of make them up from stories. But the story of the seizure of the Sabine women, or the rape of the Sabine women, which the Romans invited these people to a festival and then stole their wives, and then they went to war. And finally, it was the wives themselves, the women, that said, "Stop! You'll either kill our fathers or our husbands." But Rome, which was founded by these like robbers, and they didn't have any women folk, and so they went and got some because they needed them.
Were they single men invading a strange country?
Yes.
Huh. And then wait a minute. Did they desire women folk after getting there?
Yes, they did. And they went and got them.
Huh. Hope that doesn't happen again.
But in the state of nature, that's what you do. You know, you have a right to the bodies that you can get. In order to get away from that situation, you need an overweening power, right? If you want to protect your people, you have to protect your people. And it's going to require authority and somebody who can do it.
Let's say the British invade us again like they did in 1812.
Okay.
Like, we know they're not capable of fighting a real conflict anymore, but, you know, let's just act like they could.
Okay.
I'm trying to poke our limey friends. And you wanted to, let's just say Fredonia invaded us again. And we needed to repel that military invasion. Landing craft, aircraft, they come over here. To repel this invasion, if it's of any scale, you have to have somebody has to pass down the organizing principles to everybody to time the thing so that a strategy can be carried out and down to the last private.
Yes.
So in the prosecution of that conflict, to protect our peace, you end up having to have a sovereign there.
Right.
And so if we had a volunteer military in this case to repel Fredonia, we would, if we thought the peril was great enough and Fredonia's evil was great enough, then we would volunteer. And then as volunteer soldiers, we might be privates. We might ascend. Maybe you might be a 01. You might be an officer, a second lieutenant, whatever. And then you would have to relegate yourself obedient to that military sovereign, our new Eisenhower.
Sure. Right now I'm thinking, so I read some Theodore Roosevelt, one of the late books that he wrote. I can't remember the title offhand. And he was pretty much yelling at Woodrow Wilson, saying, you need to go to war. You need to go to war. You need to go to Europe. You need to send millions of troops to Europe. And I'm reading it thinking, why the heck did we need to go to World War I? They didn't know it was World War I, the Great War.
The Great War.
Whenever, sometimes we take our little fall trips to small towns and you see the war memorials in these little towns. A little town in central Illinois has war memorials for the Great War or the Spanish-American War, whatever you order. What did the farm kid hear? I mean, my great-grandfather was a farm kid in northern Illinois, you know, and I have a great uncle that went and served in World War I. What in the heck did that have to do with Freeport, Illinois? Yeah, granted, if Fredonia invades us, we need to defend our commonwealth. But it usually doesn't stop there.
Right.
And I'm starting to get real itchy about this.
Yeah, Teddy Roosevelt, by the way. Sorry, McKay. He said that a new nation. I'm gonna paraphrase this. These aren't exactly his words, but a new nation needed to be forged and tested by war, and that was one of his. It is my reading of him that is one of his big motivations to get into World War I, is because to achieve the greatness that America was destined for, it had to be forged in war. Yeah.
Well, and he was going to go.
Yuck.
You know, he was going to go. He wasn't going to sit at home and send other people. He wanted to lead it.
Gosh, we've outlined, I think, the first 3 laws, didn't we?
Yeah.
He follows up on that with talk about contracts. About we've got these first 3 natural laws. You know, where we need to seek out peace. We need to contract. Actually, we've only done the first 2 laws. I'm sorry. Now we need to contract with others to lay down certain rights in order to pursue that peace. And he talks about contracts, which I think are really interesting. I did not read in here where he actually says the social contract.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is the beginning of it, right? And some others pick up this ball and weaponize it.
Yeah, some detail on contracts, and I'm thinking the whole point of this is because you're going to be presumed to have contracted. to the commonwealth
Yeah.
by continuing to live in it. And there's actually some interesting stuff about contracts. I like the distinction between a contract and a gift. That a gift is something where you're just hoping to, it's a non-contractile attempt to get influence. You know, a contract, you're expecting something and you know you're going to get it, but a gift, you're just hoping to get something for it.
And there's a proper response to the gift, which is gratitude, he says.
And I'm wondering what Christmas or Boxing Day was like in the Hobbes household.
It was nasty, prudish. He says something about covenants that I was interested in. He said, covenants are legit. If you don't do something, you'll be killed. But he says that a covenant isn't legitimate if you say, if you don't do this, I'll let you kill me. Did you see that piece? It's in 14, number 29. He says, unless I do so, kill me. But he says, you cannot make a covenant that says, unless I do so, I will not resist you when you come to kill me.
Yeah, you can't give up your right to self-defense.
Right. So that made me immediately think of like no-knock police warrants or whatever. They just kick the door in. You don't even know if it's an intruder or not. They didn't knock and say, police, open up. And you get in a gun battle with the police. Like maybe you legit thought that they were burglars. You have the right, according to Hobbes, to have that gunfight on your front step.
Right. What was it, the thing that motivated people for commonwealth in the first place? It was fear of death, desire of commodious living, and hopes of getting it. So fear of death, that's the primary thing. In fact, I think that's where, if I'm going to quibble, I think it's a little incomplete. I don't think that's the primary motive for human beings. I don't think it's fear of death.
It's a big one.
It's a big one, but there are many things that you would do.
Can we flip his coin and say instead of fear of death, it's a motivation for self-preservation?
Sure. But even then, I don't think that's the primary motive. I mean, it's the ordinary motive of most people, most days, but not all the time.
What's the primary motive?
Well, I don't know, but it's something else. Are there points where
Carolingian.
Would you stand in the breach?
Fight the Fredonians?
Yeah. Well, there you are. You're sacrificing your life.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be Fredonia. It could just be your family. You know, I don't think we act, Florida man does not act out of self-preservation.
It's a bird. It's a plane. No. It's Florida man. He slickly lays that thing on here in like one paragraph about how that a covenant is illegitimate if you say that I will not resist you when you come to kill me, because he believes that this self-preservation thing is so big. And then he just leaves it. It's a paragraph, and then he just keeps on trucking. He doesn't show many checks or balances against the Leviathan. And this is the only one I've seen. I've only read this twice, and a more careful reading might turn up other checks and balances, but this is the one. This is the only one I've seen. So when the agents of the Leviathan go to enforce the covenant, whatever that is, you have the obligation to meet them with resistance. Is that your reading of that, Karl? Am I projecting my Oklahoma libertarian small government ways on that?
No, I don't think so. You're going to choose your life to the extent that you can, because that's your primary good.
Yeah.
He doesn't go much further than that, which is another place where I think he's... To me, it's a limited view of the good, but this is the top, your own life, and nobody can make you bargain that away. And if you do, it's invalid.
Yeah, and he's entirely consistent with himself here. He thinks that is a law of nature, and even the sovereign, even the commonwealth, is going to run up against the law of nature when you resist them when they come to enforce the covenant.
Yeah.
All this language is so dystopian. The sovereign, the covenant. You violated the covenant.
Yeah. It's a science fiction novel.
Whew. Law number 3.
Law number 3.
Law the third. That men perform their covenants made.
Yeah.
Okay. Seems legit. We like people to do what they said they were going to do.
I believe I read Milton Friedman somewhere way back in my misspent youth. And it wasn't misspent because of Milton Friedman. But contract law is more important than your political freedom. You know, whether you have a king or you live in a democracy doesn't mean nearly as much as whether when you make a deal for pork bellies that you're going to count on them being delivered.
Most things are governed by interpersonal contract and not by government.
Yeah, so I think the third law is a big deal. You have to do the covenants made. Without it, you cannot have commodious living, right?
By the way, Milton the cat, who you may have heard on this and other podcasts I do, is named after Milton Friedman. Not Thomas, not John Milton, Milton Friedman.
Couldn't it be both?
Maybe. It depends on who I'm talking to. In paragraph 7 here of this chapter 15, he comes out against rebellion. You can't attain sovereignty by rebellion. And he just lays it down there and just moves on. I mean, he didn't convince me. He says that you can't rebel because it just sets a bad example, and then everybody will be doing it.
Well, you can't expect that you'll win. And even if you did win, now you've won and you've shown everyone else they can do it too.
Right.
So it's not showing the logical impossibility of doing it.
It's very practical.
You just shouldn't do it.
He doesn't even say it's wrong necessarily.
And this is 100 years before the American Revolution.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll read this chunk because I think people will be interested in it. And for the other instance of attaining sovereignty by rebellion, it is manifest that, though the event follow, yet because it cannot reasonably be expected, but rather the contrary, and because by gaining it so, others are taught to gain the same in like manner, the attempt thereof is against reason. Justice, therefore, that is to say, keeping of a covenant, is a rule of reason by which we are forbidden to do anything destructive to our life and consequently a law of nature. So he says if you attain sovereignty through rebellion, it won't be long. Somebody else is going to rebel and kill you, and you've violated the law of nature. It's not in your best interest to do it, and you've shown the way. And, by the way, he sneaks in that justice is the keeping of a covenant. So we're back to Book 1 of Plato's Republic.
Yeah.
Off we go.
Yeah. Justice is keeping your deals. For Americans in particular, especially if you're a particular sort of American who was raised on 1776 and all of that, you read this and like, yuck. You know, it's directly contradicted by the Declaration of Independence.
Mm-hmm.
The states get their power by the consent of the governed. And Jefferson, when he writes that, he means the actual consent of the governed. And Hobbes, the consent of the governed is, I'm going to presume you consented because every rational person would.
Mm.
Well, no, we wouldn't. And then let's list the reasons why we won't. And that's the rest of the Declaration of Independence, all those 23 reasons, or however many there are. Quartering troops in our houses and stamp acts and other infamies of the King of England.
We should read that for this one day.
Yeah, absolutely we should. Yeah. I'll get choked up, though.
And the Anti-Federalist Papers, by the way. Those have been largely ignored. You said that those raised on 1776 and what have you choke on that a little bit, this section here about rebellion. What about all of us raised on this 1861 stuff? Like, that's the Second Revolutionary War. It didn't fly.
Right. So Lincoln's a Hobbesian?
Yep. No question about it. I mean, over and over again, it's like, divided against itself cannot stand. He doesn't want any other sovereigns on the... I mean, it's the Monroe Doctrine, really. He doesn't want any other sovereigns on his continent. Really doesn't want them on the hemisphere.
Yeah, that's a good question.
That'll make some people send us email.
Yeah. Well, it's all muddied. I mean, history's muddied. And you can say, well, yeah, but slavery. Yeah.
That's part of it.
If you join in a constitution, are you therefore not allowed to leave a constitution, a union?
Yeah. If you can't leave, there was not consent.
Right. And we see, dare we, talk about a modern political issue. I mean, there is a certain country in Europe that doesn't want to be a part of the European Union and is having a heck of a time to get out of it.
There are several of them.
Yeah. So Leviathan has sticky fingers. You join it and it's not going to let go.
Yeah.
And it'll tell you, it is unjust for you to leave us because it is against your interest. And you say, well, I don't think it's against my interest. And they say, but it really is.
Right.
It really is. And we presume that you want to stay even though you said you wanted to go. That's Hobbes.
Yeah, that's Hobbes. And Hobbes doesn't talk about ruling justly. I don't see it in here.
No, I don't see it either. For me, it's a limited understanding of human nature, a limited view of human nature, where it's just fear of death, desire of commodious living. You know, if say, Scott Hambrick, what's the goal of your life? Well, to keep living and to have commodious living. Is that the goal of your life?
That's a big chunks of it.
Sure it is. But once you've eaten,
right,
and you're still alive, is that the end?
Well, what's commodiousness, right?
Comfortable, pleasing. I don't think it's pursuit of the true, the good, and the beautiful. In my best moments, I would say the goal of life is the contemplative life. In my worst moments, it's probably like conquest,
right?
Crushing my enemies.
Yeah, the pursuit of the good, the beautiful, and the true. I buy that. Yeah, Hobbes puts the commode in commodiousness. The fourth law. Let's go. You want to just blast through these? We've been doing this now for an hour. Let's blast through a few of these. The fourth law is essentially that you're gracious when receiving a gift. With someone, yep. Knowing that people only give out of their own self-interest, you still receive the gift with gratitude, he says.
Yeah, I don't give out of my own self-interest. Do you, when you give a present?
Yeah, probably.
Are you thinking, this will do good for me?
Yeah, it's a little more around the corner than that. Like, I value Karl a great deal, and it will please me no end for him to have this pocket knife.
I'm getting a pocket knife?
I gave you a sword.
He did, in fact. The bronze sword, it's beautiful. Thank you very much. It created many good feelings in me.
Excellent. And that gives me the fuzzies too. I think that at base we have at the very bottom of all altruistic deeds, there is a motivation of self there. I do.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't believe that, but I do. And just because it benefits someone to give someone else something doesn't mean it's bad. There's also that people will believe.
Right. But what if you were very low on the empathy scale?
I am.
But even lower.
Okay.
And you didn't get warm fuzzies. Would you not give gifts?
That you would give gifts, but we would call that bait. If your empathy is too low, then it's bait.
Yeah.
Law the fifth. That every man strive to accommodate himself to the rest.
Yeah, and I like this. I chuckled at Thomas Hobbes. He's occasionally funny. His description of the crabby person that you just need to banish. A man that by asperity, that means sharpness, of nature, will strive to retain those things which to himself are superfluous and to others necessary, and for the stubbornness of his passions cannot be corrected, is to be left or cast out of society as cumbersome thereunto. I want things that are superfluous to me, and I'm going to hold on to them.
Just because you want it.
Right. It's like the 5-year-old in the Hot Wheel.
Mine.
Yeah, he wasn't playing with it until the other kid wanted it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it's the most important Hot Wheel in the world.
He puts a name on most of these things. These kind of map onto some of Thomas's virtues and stuff, too, by the way. He puts a name on these. He calls this stubbornness, insociability, froward, and intractableness. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Law the sixth. Forgive. That's a paraphrase.
Yeah. The man ought to pardon the offenses past of them that repenting desire it. I think he's sneaking it in.
Yeah. What's he sneaking in? You just tried to sneak that in, that he snuck
He's
in.
sneaking forgiveness in. I don't know that forgiveness is necessary for Leviathan. I think you could keep a strict accounting of wrongs and still have a commonwealth. And you could have a social credit score. And you could...
Ruh-roh.
And keep track of everything. I think, he's a clergyman's son. I think he's sneaking in some residual Jesus there. about forgiveness.
Just a dusting of Jesus.
Yeah. It's a funny story. It sounds funny to me. His life story. His dad was a vicar. And apparently there was some brawl in front of the church, and his dad was so embarrassed that he left town and never came back. Abandoned his family.
I'm all for this. These muscular fist fighting vicars, by the way.
I want to take a time machine and go back and see what happened. What was so embarrassing about this?
It was about the fist fight. It was about whist.
Was it really?
I have no idea. Sounds right. That would be embarrassing. I got in a fist fight over a card game. Got a split. Leave my whole family. Law of the seventh. In revenge, it is done looking to good, not to the bad of the past. So when we dole out punishments, we do it to make the future better, not because the past was bad. I like that.
So the murderer you punish for the sake of the good, not for the sake of the evil that he did?
You do it in hopes of there being less murder in the future. Right. Maybe by him. Like, this guy's a serial killer, and if we don't put him away, we're going to impoverish the state by keeping his evil self alive. And if we let him go, he'll do it again, so he's got to go. Or he will serve as an example to all others who... remember, Hobbes thinks that your highest value is self-preservation, so he would think probably that capital punishment would really get people's attention, and I don't know that it does, but I think he would think it does. Law 8.
Law number 8, that no man by deed, word, countenance, or gesture declare hatred or contempt of another.
He calls this contumely. I like that.
I like this. I like the law.
Yeah, but I hate evil people. And it's right so to do, I think.
Yeah, but if we're very quick to categorize disagreements as hatred, and then we're back to tribes and we're going to be in the state of nature.
We are in the state of nature, whether there's a sovereign or not. The laws still apply, right?
Right, but we want to build a place where we're not so quick to want to kill each other.
Yeah.
You probably shouldn't insult people, as a rule.
You bet.
Unless they really deserve it.
By countenance. Somebody walks in, you give them the stink face. You violated the 8th law.
Law the 9th, that every man acknowledge another for his equal by nature.
Yeah, he says to breach that is pride. Yeah, I love how he maps these on these virtues and vices or sins or whatever. I like that. You got number 10.
Number 10, that at the entrance into conditions of peace, no man require to reserve to himself any right which he is not content should be reserved to every one of the rest. This is John Rawls, I think. Veil of ignorance, sort of. I know, I just made him roll his eyes. If you could see this, the mention of John Rawls. Wake up, wake up.
We were talking about evil people earlier. This is Mr. Davis, my 8th grade history teacher. Your rights end where another's begin. You don't reserve any rights that you wouldn't grant to all others.
I guess it's not quite Rawls, because you might have inequality in Rawls, but you just have to be willing to have it when the veil is taken away, that you don't know where you're going to end up. So I guess it's not quite that. I apologize for making you roll your eyes so hard.
He calls the state of violating this pleonexia, or arrogance, where you want more than your own fair share. So we have property rights, but so does the other guy.
Yeah.
There you go. You don't have the right to all property. You have the right to some of it. And then we've got some rules about how you find that, how you do that.
Yeah.
I dig it. I like law of the 10th.
And then is this the 11th? If a man be trusted to judge between man and man, he must deal equally between them. We have to have equity. Good judgment. Same law for everybody.
What's better than that?
I sure would like that. That would be, I think we ought to try that.
Law of the 12th?
That such things as cannot be divided be enjoyed in common, if it can be, and if the quantity of things permit without stint, otherwise proportionably to the number of them that have right. This is like, I'm thinking of the commons
the well in the town square.
Air.
The creek.
Yeah.
If you can't do what's in the 12th, then you give the whole entirety as personal property, and you do it by lot.
Yeah.
That might be like a mineral resource, maybe. Like you're going to dig a mine. You had to dig a mine to get coal. Well, not everybody can go down in the mine and mine a little coal for their use into heat on the grate in their hovel. So you might draw lots, and now Karl is the mine operator.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing. And we still do this with like timber rights, grazing rights on public lands, elk hunting tags in Colorado.
Sure.
We do this.
So as much as I kind of squirm when I'm reading Hobbes, a whole lot of this is solid, good sense. All the stuff about contracts, you come away with it smarter.
I've got a friend that went to law school. I was talking to him. I said, do you guys ever read Hobbes? I mean, jurisprudence galore, man. He said, not nary a word.
We'll eventually read it at Online Great Books.
Yep.
Yeah.
Better than law school, apparently. 14 is, this is a big deal. We distribute stuff by lot if it's common, but can't be divvied up. But then everything else, though, is either given by seizure, first seizure, right?
Mm-hmm.
I got here first, or primogeniture.
Well, I'm a third child.
Therefore, those things which cannot be enjoyed in common nor divided ought to be adjudged to their first possessor, and in some cases to the firstborn. It's acquired by lot. He's sneaking in some stuff to shore up the monarchy in England. There's no question about it here. Impoundment, enclosure is still not probably done here. This is in 1610, 1618, whatever it is. The enclosure movement's not complete. Parliament's on the ascendancy. The monarchy is on the decline. I think he's trying to shore it up, frankly.
It would make sense, too. If you are trying to build a commonwealth where people can avoid fear of death and have commodious living and some hope of it, then shoring up custom makes sense.
Yeah.
This is the way we've always done it, and you're going to throw everything aside and make new ways.
You're going to get us all killed.
Right. So this is a kind of conservatism. Maybe you need to change stuff. Don't change it super fast. And if you don't have to change it, don't change it. Because this is the way people have ordered their lives. It's like changing the rules of poker in the middle of the hand.
I don't play games like that.
Yeah, who would?
When people are changing the rules, it's terrible.
Yeah. So you owe it to the Commonwealth to change as few rules as you can, it seems to me.
He is the father of Burke in this respect, I think. Rule of the 12th? No, I lied. 15th, you already alluded to that one, that mediators be granted safe conduct. Yeah, if somebody's mediating a conflict, you don't kill those guys. Let's leave them alone, everybody. Seems fair. 16th, questions of fact or right go to arbitration. Questions of fact are, did it really happen? Yes or no. And questions of right are, they did do the thing, but did they act within right? Mm-hmm. In both of those. And he defines everything he does, he defines pretty darn clearly. Number 17, no man is his own arbitrator. Stop me if you want to. 18th, judges must be impartial. Derp. 19th, questions of fact must be supported by witnesses. Otherwise, they are left to force. How about that, Karl? Did you read that chunk?
Well, tell me again.
Number 19, where he says, questions of fact must be supported by witnesses. A third or a fourth, he says. Otherwise, those issues are left to force.
Wow. So dueling?
Maybe.
That would change some stuff, right? When you made an accusation that there was no witness to, and the only way you could back it up was with physical force. So you don't go to court and then we question one person, then we question the other person, and then we try to decide who's more believable.
Right.
Nope. Choose your weapons.
Let's see.
I would choose a halberd, I believe.
Halberd? Well, I'm using a rifle with a scope.
Well, but we both have to have the same one.
Oh, okay.
I read a book in Neil Stephenson's book about this very time. The two characters have a duel, but the guy chooses artillery.
Right?
They have an artillery duel.
I like that.
And they're running out of stuff. They're throwing everything they can into the end of the cannon to shoot at each other. I thought it was very funny.
In a controversy of fact, the judge, being to give no more credit to one litigant than to the other, if there be no other arguments, must give credit to a third, a non-litigant witness, or to a third and fourth, or more, for else the question is undecided and left to force, contrary to the law of nature. He says it's contrary to the law of nature, but if you don't have witnesses, it's left to the law of force. That's the way I read it.
That's real interesting.
I think it's glorious. It's probably going to lead to people conceding a lot of points that they can't. Points of fact,
right.
What he calls points of fact, it's probably going to lead to more people conceding points of fact that there is no witness for.
It might lead you to making sure that there are witnesses.
Yeah.
Let's not you and I just go into that room.
Yeah.
Let's do this out there.
One of the things that I don't understand, we have a lot of surveillance cameras nowadays.
Yes,
and there'll be somebody that conducts a holdup, let's say at a ATM machine, and there's a black and white video of them committing the holdup. And then it'll go to trial. And my thought in those kinds of situations are, is this the guy in the video? That's the only question.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not how it's conducted.
Yeah.
That's not how the trials are conducted, and that's not the question at hand that's put to the jury from what little I know about that kind of thing.
Well, there are now deep fakes as well.
Right.
Video is going to be able to be faked.
Well, there wasn't 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And they would still just roll around for 5 days about every other issue. Then, is this, we saw someone get shot on the video. Is the defendant the person that pulled the trigger in the video? You want to move on?
I want to hit one thing.
Hit it.
Because we've already been running for quite a ways. When he talks about animals, so this is in 17. So I'm skipping ahead. Why it is that animals do not need to have a commonwealth.
Yeah.
Animals do not need to have a commonwealth because they don't have reason. And they don't have freedom. And I thought, well, I don't have any answers in this. I thought it was just irony. It's because we are rational and free that we need to have a commonwealth where we give up our freedom and our self-determination.
Well, yeah. I think he brings this up because Aristotle says that ants and bees are political creatures,
Yeah.
But he says that they have no natural passions of men. So they don't have jealousies, prides, other things that are the sources of these quarrels. Because he outlines early on, there are these 3 sources of quarrel. What was it? Greed, essentially, pride, and
Glory.
No, glory, it was pride. Anyway, there are 3 causes. And because these animals don't have those passions, those conflicts don't come up for them.
Well, he gives his list. So, 6th paragraph of 18. 17, I'm sorry.
Okay.
17. That the reasons why humans need commonwealth, whereas animals can just do whatever they want. Men are continually in competition for honor and dignity, while these creatures are not. Well, there's something about us where we think about honor and dignity, and animals don't do it. Secondly, that among these creatures the common good differeth not from the private. They have no common good. Man whose joy consisteth in comparing himself with other men can relish nothing but what is eminent. These are all flaws based on reason and being able to estimate this sort of thing. Because the third one, creatures having not as man the use of reason do not see nor think they see any fault in the administration of their common business. The dogs in the pack can't question the pack. They're not smart enough. And we all think that we are. They don't have language. I thought this was super interesting. The fourth, that these creatures, though they have some use of voice making known their desires and affections, yet they want that art of words by which some men can represent to others that which is good in the likeness of evil, and evil in the likeness of good. They don't have rhetoric, and we do.
That's my hobby horse right now, by the way. folks that represent evil in the likeness of good.
Yeah. Yeah, it was Socrates'.
They can't. Fifthly, the irrational creatures cannot distinguish between injury and damage.
Man is most troublesome when he is most at ease.
For then it is that he loves to show his wisdom and control the actions of them that govern the commonwealth.
Right. So all of these problems arise from what I would say is the glory of man. All of these things come up because we can think and choose. And it's because we can think and choose, then the argument goes that we have to subsume everything into the commonwealth.
Yeah. So right after this is where he talks about submission to the sovereign. Chapter 17, paragraph 13, he says, men differing from bees and ants must give up the right to govern themselves, knowing that others do the same. That's my paraphrase. And he says, you would do it like this. I authorize and give up my right of governing myself to this man or this assembly of men on this condition, that thou givest up thy right to him, and authorize all his actions in like manner. When I was a teenage person, this is the thing that griped my ass about the Constitution, is I never got a chance to sign it. I think when you turn 18, 19, 20, 21 or whatever, pick, whatever, you ought to have to go read it, and then you ought to have to sign it. And if you don't sign it, maybe you don't get to stay. But, there needs to be an opt-in.
Can't just presume that you opted in because you live here?
Right. Seems like there are people that live here that have opted out of that thing without our knowledge.
Well, how many people read it anyway?
3.
Do you have a copy on you right now?
Not on me, but I could get one within 4 steps of this desk. Without the computer. If I actually typed on something, I'd get it quicker.
Yeah, I think mine's right over there.
Yeah, you can go to Cato Institute and they'll send you one, a pocket Constitution.
And then when you get held up in the line at the airport, you can pull out your Constitution and say, am I being detained?
Well, what you do is you get that clause of the Institution graven on a steel plate. And then when you walk through security and they stop you, you pull that out and hand it to them, and then they can read it.
Yeah, we could read that one too.
Yeah, we should. So there is some talk in here about the causes, generation, and definition of the commonwealth, and a little bit further on, where we talk about how the laws of this commonwealth. There's a lot here. Let me see if I can do this without any notes. So he says, state of nature, not so good. Need to give up rights to the sovereign. We have a contract with the sovereign. That the contract with the sovereign is essentially a contract with all the others because they have abrogated their right to contract to the sovereign. So it's contracts all the way around. We got an agreement, guys. And as part of that agreement is the sovereign has the right to carry out jurisprudence, to do stuff to make sure the contracts stick in order to keep us safe and peaceful. It's the rule of law, right? The sovereign is charged with maintaining the rule of law.
Mm-hmm.
The laws are zilch for Hobbes without the sovereign fulfilling its end of the contract.
Right.
So what happens if you have a constitution and no one reads it? I mean, no one. It's just a piece of paper. The Constitution offers you no protections of any kind.
Right. It has to be actively maintained. It has to be actively done.
And who does that? The Leviathan.
Yeah.
There's nobody else that can do it. People say, oh, we're protected by the Constitution. And I understand what they're saying, but you ain't. We are protected by the government's willingness to prosecute the principles therein.
Right. So you need more than a piece of paper. You need buy-in, I guess.
Well, the Leviathan, the state, the sovereign, has to prosecute the contract, the covenant. They have to do it, or you don't have a covenant. He says you don't have a covenant without the sovereign. The whole damn thing is built on people can't do this alone.
But I don't want a Leviathan.
Well, TS.
I want a bunch of free, rational agents who believe we ought to do this, and there's my Leviathan.
So well, he talks about that.
Yeah.
He says you get a small group and they're willing to do this, and then you get a bigger group and they're willing to do another thing, and now the small group is, there's no higher authority above the sovereign. So if you have a small group that decides that it is, truly democratic and rational, and they're going to act as their own Leviathan, because there's no overweening power above the sovereigns, the group that's slightly more muscular and bigger than your group, it's tooth and claw between the groups at that point.
Yeah.
He says you have to have it.
Yeah, I'm thinking about there's a tendency for groups to betray themselves and become the opposite of what they were founded to be. You see this all the time. I'm wondering if you can have a substitute Leviathan. Is there a way to do it? That maybe you do have to have everybody sign the thing.
I think you do. In the Leviathan, that's a poisoned word, right?
Yeah.
It sounds great big, but the sovereign, he actually interchangeably uses terminology for just individuals who act as sovereigns or assemblies that act as sovereigns.
Yeah.
Like he's pretty agnostic in the way he writes about this as to what that sovereign might be. And he uses the word Leviathan, which is synonymous with the great big monster. But I think as long as the covenant is known to everyone, and you follow his rules of contract here, the rules are known to everyone, everybody consents, that the Leviathan could be very limited. And like Friedman says, almost everything could be governed by interpersonal contract. And then we have a juridical thing here that can help with those if we need.
Right.
And if you don't have a witness, you can kill each other with dirks. You're going to use a halberd. I'm going to suggest dirks because I wanted to say it.
Throwing stars.
We're sure to not die. Like one might be blind, but we'll all walk away from that one.
Creeping Leviathan is the phrase that popped into my head.
Yeah.
So maybe you could have a limited Leviathan, but how do you keep your Leviathan from getting big? And maybe that's a way.
I don't think you can.
Maybe that's a way to read the people that come after him worried about that.
Other than this thing where you have the natural right to preserve your life and resist damage to yourself that I pointed out, 40 minutes ago or whatever. Mm-hmm. Other than that, he doesn't provide for a way to keep a break on the power of the Leviathan of the sovereign.
But I want one.
Well, and our people read this, right? Like the people that wrote our Constitution read this.
And they tried.
And they darn sure tried. We've got the ability to talk about the Leviathan. We've got the ability to carry a gun because of the Leviathan. We don't have to put the Leviathan soldiers in our home.
Well, and we also had lots of divisions to make government hard, which we've gotten rid of. We used to not elect senators.
People bitch about gridlock now, and I'm like, that's the best.
Look at a diagram of the Roman Constitution in the late Republic and see how many people could veto stuff.
Everybody.
Yeah. It's
great.
It's wonderful. They had 2 presidents.
Yeah.
And the one could veto the other. I think it's perfect. We only have one. The presidency is modeled on the Consul of Rome, but we only have one of them. We should have had 2.
Albert J. Knox said, unless it's necessary to change, it's necessary not to change.
Yeah, and the reason why, it's not because you're hidebound or a traditionalist or anything, but maybe you are, but it's because people live better when the rules have some continuity.
Yeah. Yeah. Hobbes, by the way, we've talked for an hour and probably an hour and 20 minutes here.
Yeah.
And this is 36 pages.
Yep.
This book is one of the most fruitful things I have ever read. Love to hate this guy. Love to play cards with him, if I could, Jam-packed with ideas, stuff to argue with, stuff to agree with, stuff to confute and contradict you with. Fantastic. One of the most thorough writers I have ever seen.
Right. So here I am. When I say that he bothers me, when you read a book that bugs you in a productive way, that's a good thing.
Oh, it's the best.
It's a good thing. It's like, I'm not so sure he's right, but then I'm not sure how he's wrong. And then what you're going to do is think about it for the next 3 days, and maybe you agree with him, maybe you don't, but you come out the other side a smarter person who has thought more deeply and better about it.
when I am the sovereign, Karl,
Yes.
you can't even run for dog catcher if you don't read these 36 pages.
Okay. Is dog catcher an elected position?
Yes.
Not one that you choose by lot because nobody wants to do it?
No, I don't think so. We want our dog catchers to be passionate about their work, but we don't want nepotism to people give it to their, retarded nephew or whatever, So we're going to go ahead and elect that one up.
You have the dog catcher family.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Kennedys.
That's unnecessary now. You know what we should do? We were talking about reading the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and we should do that. We need to read the Articles of Confederation, too.
Okay.
And talk about the backroom bloodless coup that threw out our first set of laws.
I'm not at all familiar with the Articles of Confederation, so that would be fun.
Yeah, I haven't read them in 25 years.
I have another suggestion of something to read, as long as I think we should read A Modest Proposal by Jonathan Swift.
Yeah.
That's as good as the Babylon Bee.
Yeah, we should do that. Oh, gosh, we've got so much stuff to do. This is so much fun. Thank you for doing this with me, Karl, and let me do this with you.
No, my pleasure. Thank you.
It's a delight. And thank you guys so much for listening. Karl and I work for onlinegreatbooks.com, and this is what all of our people do every day. When I say all of our people, I mean just regular folks that decided that they wanted to come to a better understanding of these books and be changed by them. If you're interested in doing that, we'll help you. You can go to onlinegreatbooks.com and look around on that site and click on the Join Now button. And if enrollment's open, by God, you should join. And if it isn't, you can join our VIP waiting list, and then you will be among the first to know when we do open up for the next enrollment.
Yep.
Is there anything you want to say to these people, Karl? Karl leads a great number of these seminars, by the way, for our regular members.
Come on in. The water's fine. Don't be frightened. It's super fun. It's why you have a mind.
Yeah. So much better than... Let's list a few things that it's better than, Karl. Facebook.
Yes. Netflix.
Ooh. Yeah, that's probably enough. Top 40 radio.
The NFL.
I was going to say sports ball. Fill in your favorite sport. Watching your favorite sport. Participating in your favorite sport is pretty good.
Movies.
Except for Cool Hand Luke.
Or Mad Max Fury Road.
Is that your favorite right now?
That's my favorite right now. That's so good. It's so good. I've watched it 4 times in the last 2 weeks. Maybe I'll watch it again tonight.
It's better than lots of things. It's better than newspapers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's better than a lot of things. Come join us, guys. We would love to have you, and we will talk with you about these books in one of our seminars. Send this show to somebody that you like, and particularly someone you don't like, and pass the word around. Our little show is growing and growing and growing. It's slow but steady, and we know we ain't for everybody. But if you know somebody you think that we might just be for, send it to them and help us grow our little show. And thanks so much for listening.
Thank you.
Bye.